Well, I think we have it. We have at least by my fingers and toes, at least 8 of us. I think there's 9 technically. And so I think we'll get rolling since it's 6:01. I'd like to call to order the meeting on January 22nd of the Centennial Budget Committee. I'm talking about the 2025 budget priorities. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Can I get a second? Thank you. Everyone in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone who doesn't say no, just because I think we got everyone. All right, great. We'll do that. All right, item 2.0 introductions. So most of us are the same budget committee as last year's. Thank you so much to all of you for your time and investment in the Centennial community. We do have one new addition. His name is Will Mooring. He was appointed to the Centennial School Board not too long ago. And I just wanted to say welcome, Will. Welcome to the Budget Committee.
Thank you, Jess. And hi, everyone that I haven't met yet, which is maybe 1 or 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. Great to be here.
All right. Well, thank you. All right. And we'll keep moving along. Item 3.0 reports. With this one, we're going to get it started with Superintendent Owens, who is going to walk us through what we're looking at financially.
Great. Thank you, Chair Harden. Good to see everybody this evening. So you've got Director of Business and Operations, Paul Southerton, and me for the next little bit. So buckle up and stay tuned because we've got quite a bit of information that we'd like to share. Paul, if you can advance the slide, he's going to control the navigation. So you might hear me ask him to move the slide forward. So what you're going to get from me basically is a high-level overview of the state of affairs statewide and then also district-wide. And then Paul's going to clean it up with some fine detail on the numbers. Specifically, what I'll be sharing is statewide budget conditions, state school fund support, and student investment account update, and then also local conditions. Paul is specifically going to talk about roles and responsibilities of the budget committee and an overview of the process. He'll talk about the year-to-date on this current fiscal year, as well as financial projections for the upcoming year, which is the budget that we're focused on developing together. We'll talk about the budget priorities for the 25-26 school year. And I know that Chair Harden had mentioned that that was a theme for this evening's meeting. And then a calendar reminder. Before we advance the slide, Director Southerton, is there anything that you wanted to make sure to share in addition to how I framed it?
No, I think you did a great job. I think I'd just like to share my gratitude for everybody being here tonight, especially our community budget committee members. Great to see you all again. Looking forward. I can't believe this is now the 5th budget that I'll be working on with the district, and we've had a lot of you here for the whole time that I've been here and some new faces. So thanks for tuning in tonight. And we are going to, Superintendent Owens said, we're going to throw a lot of information at you. So please, there are intentional breaks throughout the presentation. Please do ask questions and let us know what additional information we can provide or clarifying questions or whatnot. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Superintendent Owens.
Great. Thank you, Director Southerton. So we have about 6 slides with me, and I'll say that after those 6, there will be a time for questions or comments. And there's a lot of information that I'll be sharing. So if before we get to that 6th slide, you have questions, feel free to ask them along the way, if that's okay, Chair Harden.
That is absolutely fine with me.
Great. Sounds good. So slide 3. Perfect. So between Director Southerton and me, there's going to be quite a bit of information for us to share tonight. I'll do my best to keep things fairly high level and non-jargony to the extent that I'm able to, and that's easier said than done. The state school fund is the primary revenue source for schools in Oregon. It's funded on a 2-year cycle known as a biennium, so you'll be hearing that term quite a bit. In the upcoming 25-26 school year, the state will be entering the first year of the biennium, meaning that the state's allocation for K-12 education is currently unknown. We knew our allocation coming into this year. We don't know it coming into next year. As you're likely aware, the legislature will be meeting throughout the spring, which will bring more clarity as to the education funding picture as we approach the summer. Obviously, we can't wait until the summer to undergo our budgeting process. So part of our process will include some assumptions of what funding will look like in the coming biennium, and that's going to be based on the information that's available to us. This report will likely and hopefully be the last time I speak to the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, which is ESSER, as you probably heard, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Those funds, and we've talked about them for the last few years, those funds expired this last September, September 24. They are no longer available to us. We were, however, able to move some of our summer 24 expenses that would have normally been funded from the general fund into ESSER, which is fortunate because, as will be discussed later, we added 3 additional teaching positions due to disproportionately large class sizes at 3 locations. Our special education costs are over budget, and we're seeing overall lower enrollment and therefore lower funding than expected. Overall, the limited remaining ESSER funds provide an indirect benefit to Centennial in this current school year, offsetting the expense increases and reduced revenue that were noted previously. That will not be the case in the coming year. We will need to live within our state-provided means, to take a line from Vice Chair Shields. As you've heard Director Southerton and me say several times over the past few years, expenses to maintain current levels of service outpace our revenue. I'll say this in another way, in simpler terms. The state of Oregon is not projected to provide sufficient funds to do the same things next year that we are doing this year. I'll offer a bit more detail here and in subsequent slides as to why that's the case. First, payroll costs, and more specifically to payroll costs, PERS and cost of living increases continue to outpace our revenue. The next slide will break that down further. You may have heard information about PERS rate increases that will soon impact the district. As you're likely aware, PERS, or the Public Employee Retirement System, has a large funding gap between the promised benefits and the funds to provide those benefits. Each biennium, public agencies are provided a PERS employer rate that takes into account the costs for retirement benefits for current employees and retirees. This rate is applied to every dollar of compensation paid by the school district. Once set at 6%, this has grown substantially over the years to and was set at approximately 28% for the last biennium and is projected to be approximately 30% for the next 2 years in the next biennium. Said another way, when PERS began, the district paid $60 to PERS for every $1,000 of salary. This year, it was $280 per $1,000 of salary, and next year it will be $300 per $1,000. So you can see how that increase has happened over time. These dynamics are certainly not specific to Centennial and are showing up more acutely elsewhere in the state. Last spring, you heard about budget cuts to school districts large and small, Salem-Keizer and Portland Public, for example. And pay attention this spring. You're going to begin hearing more and more districts talk about cuts they're making or that they plan to be making, and in some cases, rather large cuts. During the legislative session, you will hear about the current service level, or CSL. CSL, in my opinion, is a misnomer. Simply put, it does not fund the current levels of service. Costs outpace CSL. Having discussed the broader landscape for school funding in Oregon, let's narrow in on how things look for Centennial. The screen that you see here is split up into 2 columns. On the left, you'll see the projected inputs from the state school fund. On the right, you're going to see our projected expenses, and there's a lot of information, so I'll try my best to break it down. As you can see on the left, the governor's proposed budget includes a state school fund biennium allocation of 11.36 billion allocated across all school districts in the state, not just for us. Those funds are proposed to be provided in a stair-step fashion, with 49% of funds allocated in the first year of the biennium and 51% in the second to account for increased costs year over year. As you can see on the bottom left, the state school biennium increase is projected to be 6.9% in year one next year in 25-26, which sounds all right until we outline the district's expenses on the right side. On the right side of the screen, there's quite a bit of information, so I'll take a moment to orient you. But before I do that, I'll just cut to the chase. Our expenses are projected to increase by at least 8%. So there's a gap of at least 1.1% for which the biennium state school fund allocation does not provide. In short, Centennial's expenses continue to exceed revenues. Centennial's roll-up or continued service level costs for 25-26 look like this. And you're running from top to bottom here. And the first thing that we'll talk about is the salary schedule for employees. Until an employee reaches the top of their respective salary schedule, they receive an annual step increase equal to 3.25%. 2/3 of our staff are eligible for this increase, which amounts to an overall projected increase of 2% from this current year's expenses. Cost of living adjustments are collectively bargained. Our classified employees bargained a 5% increase for this current year and a 2.5% increase for 25-26. This winter, the district begins bargaining with our licensed staff who have a 2.42% increase for this year. While bargaining has yet to commence, we need to forecast a number in the budget for which we expect our expenses to be for next year. So we forecasted a 4% increase on the cost of living adjustment for licensed staff for this coming year. This level of increase is expected to keep Centennial salaries for teaching and other licensed positions in the top 50% of Eastside school districts. The previously mentioned PERS cost increase is equivalent to 2%. Centennial, along with many other school districts, continues to experience declining enrollment, which is projected to impact our budget negatively to the tune of $800,000 to $1 million. The result is an increased projected deficit. Expenses minus our state school fund allocation of $3.5 to $4 million, or approximately 5% of our general fund budget, up from 2.6% in the current year. So I'll say that again. We're projected to overspend our budget by $3.5 to $4 million for next year. The final two bullet points demonstrate that we continue deficit spending, so I'll break that comment down a little bit further. As you likely know, through a blend of thoughtful decision-making and challenging circumstances over the past few years, the district has developed a more robust ending fund balance, allowing the district to better withstand the impacts of future funding shortfalls and fluctuations while maintaining strong academic programs and support for our students. Over the past 4 years, Centennial has incorporated a planned fund balance spend down into its budget formula. This is something that we have begun and will continue this past year and will continue to do in the 25-26 budget. However, there's a healthy balance to ensuring we do that sustainably. So as you can see in the final two bullet points on the screen, in the current year, we're scheduled to overspend our state funding allocation by $2 million. We planned for that. In the 25-26 school year, if no intervention is taken, our forecasted deficit spend would be $3.5 to $4 million. The delta between our current level of service and the cost to provide those services is developing a wider and wider gap. With our fund balance, we're prepared to continue to deficit spend into the near future. However, a deficit of $3.5 to $4 million is unsustainable, as that would snowball into larger and larger annual deficits. This will require us to make some reductions in our budget in the coming year, as we did for this year. Any reductions are challenging because there isn't fat in our operation to begin with. I'll take an opportunity to soapbox a little bit on what Director Southerton and I believe would be beneficial. East County school districts, including Centennial, would benefit from improvement to the state school fund to better account for the needs of all students and how they present. For example, there are currently only weights or added portions of funding for English language learners, poverty as measured by census tracking, students experiencing disabilities, and other limited factors. Some of these weights are only periodically, such as poverty, or have caps, such as the percentage of students experiencing a disability, which fails to fully address the needs of our students. Additionally, there are no weights for historically marginalized, diversity of community, underserved communities, and other factors. Eliminating the cap on funding for students experiencing a disability, annual updates to the poverty measures, and improving the formula to better reflect the needs of students today would greatly improve our ability to serve students. And it's important to keep in mind that absent additional funding, changes to the formula will only serve to redistribute insufficient resources. It won't guarantee adequate services statewide. In addition to this, the legislature needs to fund schools at the quality education model level of funding. The fact that this hasn't happened despite continued record revenues at the state level that exceeds forecasts is disappointing and frustrating. The underfunding of students qualifying for special education services has been a challenge. The federal government has never fully funded Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA. In Oregon, the additional funding for students with disabilities is capped at 11%, despite most districts in our state having between 13 and 15% special education rates. It's important to note that this is to prevent incentivizing over-identification, which is a valid policy, but it means that services needed and provided outstrips the funding that we receive to provide those services. So if we truly want to serve all students equitably, then we need an adequate funding to meet federal IDEA requirements for all qualified students. It's also worth mentioning, drawing your attention to the right side of the screen, that in the wake of the PPS strike last year, the governor has committed to reviewing the way the state calculates the amount needed to fund schools from one biennium to the next. This resulted in a projected increase of funding that, while still insufficient, is an improvement of the previous formula. This legislative session will be important towards addressing the funding dynamics that I've described, and there are opportunities for Centennial to weigh in, and we'll be sure to help make those known. Next slide, thank you. Centennial, along with other districts in the state, does receive supplemental funding sources. In 2022, the Oregon Department of Education, or ODE, implemented Aligning for Student Success, aligning 6 separate federal and state programs. As you can see on the right of the screen, those sources include High School Success, which voters passed in Oregon in 2016, the Student Investment Account, which is the portion provided to K-12 school districts of the Student Success Act passed by the Oregon legislature in 2019. Other funding sources are listed here, and we can address those further if you're interested in knowing more about those. It's worth noting that Centennial's strategic planning process, which we'll talk about a little bit more, resulting in Roadmap 27, simultaneously accomplished aligning for student success requirements. Next slide. On the screen here, you can see a rundown of several of the strategies that we've been able to implement by virtue of these funding sources, which provided approximately $7 million to the district in the 24-25 school year budget. These include the additional Centennial Virtual Academy and the associated staffing costs. That program we stood up in 2020. 3 social workers, a counselor at the middle school level, an MTSS TOSA, English language teacher for students whose primary language is one other than English, 4 middle school teachers, 4 assistant principals at the elementary and middle level, the reinstatement of middle school athletics, REAP at CMS, additional family and communication support, strategic planning and implementation support, dropout prevention efforts, responsive classroom training, and other professional learning for our staff, as well as the expansion of outside of district placements. Next slide. That was a lot of information. And again, My portion of this presentation was to describe the overall landscape of school funding in the state as it pertains to Centennial. I'll have more to share when the draft budget is presented in the spring. For now, however, I'll address any questions that you might have before turning it over to Director Southerton, who will lead us through the budget committee roles and responsibilities.
Thanks for the rainbows and sunshine, James.
I know. You're welcome.
Okay, everybody, I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to ask the questions that they have. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of do a roll call to each one of us. And I will just start going down the little list of panelists I have. So Director Mooring.
Thank you, Chair Harden. Superintendent Owens, thank you for the informative presentation. Wanted to circle back on the note of enrollment being lower. Was there some planned lower enrollment to make space for future development within the school district boundaries? We know there's a lot of development taking place. I didn't know if that was some of that was related to it currently, and we expected to see naturally as the area grows, or are we just seeing lower population or outward population trends from the district at large?
Yeah, good question. I'll explain the dynamics as I have experienced and know them, and then I'll let Director Southerton or others pick up the pieces where they see fit there. But what I'll say is the south side of the school district, obviously, and you as a realtor know, there's a lot of development that's happening on that side of the district. And my understanding is that Centennial has the most developable land in Multnomah County. So there's that aspect. And so we have increasing enrollment on the south side of the district. Other sides of the district are more dynamic, and I think that that's where we're seeing more of the population loss. And so it's kind of like a hole in the boat. You're increasing over here, but you're losing over here. And there's a lot of factors to that. Residents age in place. I attended Centennial schools back in the day. My mom still lives in the district. She doesn't have kids, but still lives in the house where I grew up. And so we've seen that phenomenon happen in Centennial and elsewhere as well. And then we've also just seen attrition in school districts for a variety of reasons, people being priced out of the metro area and needing to move further out into suburbs. People have moved into Washington and so forth. Some have chosen online schools. Some have chosen homeschool. So there's a variety of dynamics and factors that have resulted in lower enrollment. And this is something that we've seen exacerbate during the pandemic, but it's been a trend since the last 10 years or so. Our enrollment now is about 54 to 5,500. Back about 10 years ago, it was 6,700. So we've gradually been losing students. And even with the new development, that's helping as a bit of a stopgap, and we've been leveling out. But it is not presenting as increased enrollment. Paul, do you want to clean that up?
I think you hit it spot on. I don't know that I have much to add.
Did that address your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
I think the only thing I would add is it is there, with the exception of some pockets, it is a statewide trend. Many districts are seeing continued declining enrollment. So it's not a uniquely Centennial story. You can see maybe North Clackamas where there's a lot of building going on where they're seeing some additions still. But apart from that, statewide, you are seeing the same thing happen.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the questions. Next up, Amber Topham.
Thank you. Two on the slide when we were first going through it, the 49-51 split. When you were showing the numbers, the first one was 5.56 billion for the 25-26 school year projected. And then for the 51%, it was 5.50 billion, and it's less. And it's not, that doesn't seem like the numbers are right on that. Can you clarify that for me?
Director Southerton?
Yeah, good question. Let me check on that. But they might be just reversed in the presentation, so apologies for that. I'll get that cleaned up. So 11.36 times 0.49 would be the first biennium, right? So that's going to be the 5.56. and then it's going to be 5.82 for the second one.
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Yep. And I see Superintendent Owens cleaning that up in real time. Thank you.
Nice catch.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That was a test. Good job, Amber. Long time budget committee member. Perfect, spot on.
All right. Moving on, Director Andrews. Did you have any questions, Claudia?
No questions. Sorry, took me a while to unmute.
Thank you. Next up, Director Lynn.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Rod Betcher.
Hi, everybody. I have a couple of questions. They're, I think, pretty quick. The declining enrollment, I'm going to circle back to that. And just a little interior question. Does that mean that we'll have smaller class sizes, generally speaking, if we continue to go down? Because I'm not sure how many kids that means over the entire district. So does that mean that, or does it mean a smaller teaching staff to keep following the downward trend of the kid population?
Yeah, good question. I'll start and then Director Southerton can add too. It's in short, no. The smaller amount of students does not preserve our ability to keep our full force. So we have gradually been right sizing our FTE, which is our full-time equivalent, which is the number of teachers that you would have or number classified that you would have annually as we have projected enrollment declines. So as we experience declines, we make corresponding adjustments for the subsequent year. And so I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I know the exercises that we go through annually to assign teachers to classrooms, and that number has gradually decreased over time. We haven't had to implement any reductions in force because we've counted on attrition to be able to absorb those reductions. So when we see a reduction in the number of students, there's a corresponding reduction of staffing that we take into account for that. Director Southerton, how did I do?
Spot on. So our funding, as Superintendent Owens was saying in his portion of the presentation, is directly dependent on the number of students that present. So when we have fewer students enrolled, we get fewer dollars to spend on staff. And so we have to right size every single year, right? Up or down, depending if enrollment is higher or lower. Now, students is I've heard said, and I can't give credit to because I don't remember where I heard it come from first, but the students don't present in nice round sizes of 25, right? So even though this year we have lower enrollment than forecasted, we ended up adding 3 teaching positions because how they presented was 34 kiddos in a 4th grade class at Pleasant Valley and 29 kindergartners at Butler Creek. And then we had at Centennial Middle School, which had a disproportionately large share of the middle school enrollment, or slightly higher than expected. And so we had to add what we call hotspot teacher positions. So kind of as the year has already begun, we forecasted, we checked enrollments, and then the year happens and you get late arrivals, you get new enrollments, you get transfers in. And so you have to make adjustments in real time. And so we had to add 3 additional teaching positions overall this year, even though we have fewer students than what we forecasted. So it's a challenge.
And my second question, I have many more than that, but I'll just get a hold of somebody that has some time on their hands, right? Paul, you and me.
Nothing but time.
Too much time, too little time. The other question is, I think I want to just put it on the radar out there and tell me how you're dealing with it as a budget number. There's a new administration in DC, and he's said a lot of things about the Department of Ed that we don't even need it. I don't even know what that means for funding. So are you looking at that as a kind of a variable in the equation that is to you to be? And if he doesn't do anything until after July 1st, when we start the new year, are we going to be able to will we have our ears to the ground good enough to see what's coming before it comes into our, you know, rear view mirror, I guess, to finish the metaphor?
Paul, I'll let you field that.
Yeah, I think the short answer is from a budget standpoint, from a business manager standpoint, we are, yes, acutely aware that there's a new administration and there's lots of conversation going on. Right now, we're cautiously optimistic that things will largely remain the same as it impacts our funding from the federal level, because the conversation has been more about that administrative, that executive department maybe going away, not the funding going away that gets passed through the states. And so what the conversation has been, that it's been out in the public domain, is that it's been let state manage it rather than the feds manage it. So from a dollars standpoint, we are cautiously optimistic that we're not going to see a large scale reductions from the federal level. And hope is not a plan, so we remain diligently and acutely aware, right, of what's going on, and will react appropriately.
Thank you, and I'll yield my time, but I will tell you that I would sit on any committee that can deal with that particular issue when it comes up. So if you want some help.
Appreciate it as always. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Rod. Next up, Michael Newman.
I basically had the same question as Rod for that second question about the federal funding. So I do appreciate your answer and also echo those sentiments, but I have no additional questions. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Next up, Board Vice Chair Shields.
No specific question, just a comment. First of all, Superintendent Owens, that was a very good presentation, and I appreciate that. Second of all, will your PowerPoint presentation be available to us in a location on our website?
We can do that.
That'd be great. Thank you, because there is a lot of information to soak in and fact check. Thank you. Next up, Myrna Jensen.
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, I think Karen Wolfgang. Is that you?
It is me, my alter ego. Hi. My only questions right now are existential. That was a really great presentation, and I appreciate all the details, even though overall it's very heavy. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Board Chair Slawski.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It is, yeah, it's definitely concerning. There's a lot in there. I appreciate you making that available, because I think it will give us great points to advocate with the legislature as they're going through things. The way that you lined some things out really kind of was like, ooh, I'm going to pull that out, and that's what, so I appreciate all of your work. And let's see what we can do to help support this from the other end as well.
Absolutely. Did I miss anyone? Before moving on to myself, I think I got everyone. I didn't have any question, but I, like most of you, appreciated the presentation, and the talking points for advocacy was very helpful and beneficial to us. And those are, when people ask how we could directly help the Centennial school district, it's nice to have a couple things to just pop right off the top of our head. So thank you for that. If nothing else, we will move on to the next part. Item 3.1.2, the budget process, led by Director Southerton.
All right, thanks for bearing with us. So that was your first intermission, if you will. There's a lot of information. There'll be one other break in between the three parts that we're presenting here tonight. So we're going to jump into the process. So first over, go over roles and responsibilities of the budget committee. So just this will be a review for some and new for others. So feel free that there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So just to hit the highlights, members of the budget committee participate in the budget processing. This is participatory budgeting. We want to hear from you. We need to hear from you on the priorities and what we should think about when we're preparing a proposed budget to bring to you in April. Members attend the committee work session today and 2 meetings. Members provide direction to us, the administration, Superintendent Owens, myself, and others. Members receive the proposed budget in April, so you'll receive the actual document. I will typically, has been my practice to send that to you a day or 2 in advance electronically before our meeting, and then we will also post it on the website and have hard copies in the district. Members discuss and provide feedback to the administration during the meetings, and members of the budget committee also hear public comment feedback from our community. That typically takes place at our second meeting when we have a final budget up for your consideration of approval. Ultimately, then members approve the budget if it reflects the priorities as you've established, as we've established tonight, and you ultimately send it to the school board for final approval and adoption in June. So work session tonight, first meeting in April, second meeting in May, and then school board in June. If we don't adopt a budget by June, we have no authority to spend money in July. So the timeline is really critical in Oregon when doing budgeting. The budget committee has some things that are kind of out of their scope, right? The budget committee doesn't set salaries or benefit levels. Those are negotiated with the collective bargaining units and other employee groups. The budget committee doesn't place staff, add or delete programs, and they don't develop policies. These responsibilities are the responsibility of either the board, the school board, or the administration. Looking at the budget and kind of how we land and what are some parameters and some core tenets that we follow, as Superintendent Owens discussed, we do have some deficits planned this year and potentially next year. And that's because we take a long-term approach to budgeting. We understand that large swings, either increases or decreases, are very disruptive to learners, to our students, to our community, and to our staff. So we want to maintain adequate financial controls and reserves so we can absorb those economic downturns, state school funds shortages, cuts, or other revenue shortfalls. We do react appropriately to these downturns. We want to, but we want to use a scalpel, right? We want to be precise in any adjustments that we're making and trying to limit the impacts that they have on our core mission of serving students. This approach limits those large swings as discussed, which are so disruptive. And that's using prudent use of our accumulated reserves to provide us that stability to the core programs when we have these swings. Together, overall, these practices reduce the likelihood of large reductions, layoffs, budget shortfalls that you may observe at other districts. So Superintendent Owen said, you heard about the strike in Portland Public and potential issues at Salem Kaiser. We've heard other districts, Silver Falls, we've heard, other districts encountering all kinds of different issues around the state. And this approach that we've developed that precedes me and that I've been following for the last 5 years, and Centennial's had it for longer, has really insulated us from those big swings that you've heard about and seen in our neighboring districts. So we do really try to find these follow these long-term principles. Budget committee rules are under Oregon budget law. All meetings are open and subject to public meetings law, meaning they must be noticed and we must meet in public and no decisions can be made outside of the budget meetings. A quorum is required to conduct business, so a majority plus 1, and then a majority of those present is required to take action. The chair and vice chair are selected by the committee at the first meeting. The first official meeting is April 23rd. Today is just a work session, no action taken. The committee may request and will receive additional information throughout the process. So again, this is participatory budgeting. So we want to hear from you. We want to help provide information, make sure that you feel really informed, and we want to be exceptionally transparent in our process. That has been our process in our history, and we want to continue that. Last year, we received, well over 100 questions and comments and suggestions throughout the process, and that's fantastic. We love that kind of engagement, and want to hear from folks. So the committee must take public comment and hear public comment before a budget can be approved. The budget could be approved at the first meeting or second meeting, but the comment we need to provide our community opportunity for those public comments before approving. The committee approves the budget and each tax levy. So we have an operating levy and a bond levy in Centennial. You might ask, how does it get approved? And it's just like a board meeting, only it's the budget meeting and budget committee. And so there's a motion. And so a member of the committee, not the administration, so not me, not Superintendent Owens, not any of the school district directors or department heads, but you all, the budget committee, needs to make a motion to approve the budget and the tax rates and tax levy. Then a vote is taken, and if the majority of the committee supports the motion, then the budget, tax rate, and tax levy are approved to move forward to the school board for adoption and approval of their resolution in June. And this is an example of the motion that was approved in a previous year. Some additional resources, and again, this PowerPoint will be available. There is local budgeting in Oregon information PDF put out by the Oregon Department of Revenue. There's the budget manual, which I have to know to make sure that we're following all the rules and required deadlines and processes. And then there's what we call the PBAM manual, or the Programmatic Budgeting and Accounting Manual. So when you see the budget, if you haven't seen one before, for the new members with us this evening, you'll see that there are fund numbers and there's function or activities numbers. And then underneath there's object numbers, salary numbers, benefits numbers, hired services, and they all have these codes. And so the PBAM manual, or the Program Budgeting and Accounting Manual, kind of explains what those codes mean. There's a short descriptor next to it, and that should also be able to inform you. And sometimes you would like a further description, and so that's where the manual comes in handy. All right, that was a little quicker than the first section, but still a lot of information. I want to provide an opportunity for questions.
All right.
You're muted, Chair Harden.
I am muted, and we will go through roll call just like we did before, just to make sure everyone's getting an opportunity. Sorry if the order is different this time than it was previously, but we'll just go through it. Amber Topham, start us off. Any questions?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Rod Betcher.
I do have a couple based on the slides. The one slide that shows what you can and cannot do. In other words, what you cannot do. It doesn't mean you're silenced as a person who in the school district is probably more intelligent about the budget than most people, unless there are CPAs and accountants and that sort of thing out there. But it doesn't mean that you cannot suggest things. We cannot set things, but we can suggest some things, and you can get answers back on those. But that's the point, as you get closer to the end of the budget, where things really start to become important to ask questions if you can't do it. Been on the board a long time, been on the budget committee longer, 35 years. We finally got to a point where I can enjoy doing the budget, because a lot of the questions can be answered, and I thank Paul for continuing on with this level of interrogation and intensity. I'll call it that. So I had that one question. I wanted to make sure that even our committee can have. You can't have the power to set committees, to set salaries, to set best. You can have questions that come about if they have not yet been answered at this point. So they still need to be asked, I think, at this point, so you can maintain your responsibilities for the job you have taken on for the budget committee. I've always felt that the budget committee is a job to be done. It's not a nice thing to go in and visit with folks and be on a committee. It's very important.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. We always want that feedback. We always want to hear those questions. We always want to be transparent and explain why things are set that way. And yes, so you can always offer that feedback and whatnot. What you can't, what we, when we collectively bargain with our classified group last year, for example, you can't override those terms, right? That's a legally binding agreement. And so that's been approved by the board and approved by the union and ratified by the union, right? So it's that kind of thing. You can't go, oh, well, you all really messed up on there. And instead of 5%, you should have given them 6%, or or whatever it may be. Or I think the benefits level should be set at that. That's all part of the bargaining process. So we appreciate your feedback, and you can certainly talk about how we arrived at what we arrived at, potentially. And it's a legal obligation at this point, and so the district doesn't have power to break that agreement.
And I think we all know that you can't break something that's legally bound, and everyone's gone through the negotiations, and they've all shook hands and made that the way we're going to go this year. I'm just saying is that we're going forward, or for understanding for the people that are asking the questions. I think it's important to know how they got there, and unless that is protected conversations, then I think we need to be as honest with the group that is doing the work on the budget committee, so they feel like they want to continue. They feel like that their input is valuable and it means something.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And that's where, when we get to priorities, that's really like you all are telling us, directing us what we should focus on. Right. And so then if I've done my job, or we've done our job as a district, then when we come to you with a proposed budget in April, we're going to then show you how this budget speaks to those priorities that you all gave us. Right. So great. Thank you, Rod. I appreciate those comments.
Thank you, Paul.
All right. Thank you, Rod. Director Andrews.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lynn.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Michael Newman.
No additional questions, thanks.
Thank you. Director Mooring.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Myrna Jensen.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Wolfgang.
I don't have any questions. I just want to put out there that one of the things I struggle with in the budget process is I always seem to hear input from people that I interact with at the various schools after the time has passed to get that input considered for the budget that we're passing. So I just want to I think I understand that the strategic planning process is also kind of an opportunity for people to share priorities and needs. So maybe that's a way to keep the pipeline open for public feedback. But I don't really have like I said, question around that, just a statement of intention to try to get that input on a reasonable timeline so that it can be considered, and really keep the permeability and keep those really creative ideas coming from our community. That's all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't want to voices not to be heard by all means. Thank you for that. Board Vice Chair Shields.
Just comment, thank you.
Board Chair Slawski.
No questions. Thank you.
And I did not have any questions either. Is there anyone that I missed? Raise your hand. Feel free to speak up. All right. Well, thank you. All right. We will move on to item 3.4, budget priorities for 2025-2026.
Oh, sorry, Chair.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Chair Harden. We got the financial results to go through first and then priorities.
Oh, excuse me.
Okay, there was an extra intermission in there. My apologies.
My mistake. My mistake.
All right.
Proceed.
We'll jump into the year-to-date results. So 24-25, where we are now, and then 25-26, what we're projecting both in enrollment as well as funding, also known as revenue, and then expenses. So just a refresher, as Superintendent Owen said, 95% of our revenue is directly based on the number of students enrolled in our school and then how they present with the weights that are allocated by the Oregon Department of Education. We're advocating for additional considerations, but there are only these weights at this point in time. And so when we have students who present that are experiencing any of these weighted conditions, we do receive some additional funding for that. Important to know, we have to forecast these numbers in advance. So the Oregon Department of Education is asking for our enrollment projections for next September, right? 8 months from now. They need those by the end of this month. I need to tell them how many students I think are going to show up in September, and they're starting to determine what allocations will look like. Now, that will be updated between now and then, but the state school fund is not even established at this point in time, and they're asking for us for our projection. So the work that we're doing is timely, and it does, it does matter and has importance, and that's why we start budgeting so early. Looking at enrollment, we look at numbers year over year. We can see that in K5 October 23, these are all October numbers. That's a typical standard of practice because you have people enrolling and coming in, late arrivals in September, and we start after the holidays. So October is the first full month of learning. And so that's a common measuring point that many districts use. And so looking year over year, you can see we've got some declining enrollment at the elementary level, the K through 5. We've got a little bit higher, 14 higher students this year at the 6 through 8 level, nearly 50 students fewer at the high school level, and then 14 fewer students at the outplacement. You'll notice that number is green because that means that those students are being served in Centennial schools rather than outplacements. And so even though that's a negative number, it's a positive that we're not outsourcing or outplacing students, that we're developing more and more competencies to be able to serve those students at their neighborhood schools. Overall, looking at the right side of the screen, you can see our 3-year trend of the continuing declining enrollment. And as noted, similar trends are being seen statewide. OD will release enrollment data at the end of January. And so then we'll really kind of see, is this on average? Are we above average? Are we below average? What are we seeing? And how do we compare holistically to the other 196 school districts in Oregon? Some notes. So as of December, we were at 55-54 total enrollment. And we're forecasting for this year to have an average of 55-16. So you'll say, well, wait a second, that's more not less, why are you saying that we have declining enrollment? And that's because throughout the year, historically, we've seen a drop in enrollment as the school year progresses between 120 and 160 students, meaning on average year, we will likely, if we see the same level of withdrawn students or students that have early graduation or students that have transferred out, we're likely to end the year closer to 5450, which is 100 students fewer than what's being what's anticipated, right? So enrollment is not evenly distributed, as you see on the right side of the screen here. Hot spot or mid-year ads that we talked about, Butler Creek, Pleasant Valley, and Centennial Middle School, which does mean higher costs despite lower enrollment. Overall, what's that look like for our financial picture? So, we forecasted to have $78.8 million in state and local support. So property taxes, local grants, local funding, and state funding. With that lower enrollment, we're now just estimating that we'll have about $78 million instead of 78.8. Meanwhile, we believe that expenses are going to be overall where we forecast them at. So we're not going to see a decline in expenses, even though we're seeing a decline in enrollment. And as Superintendent Owens explained, that's largely due to higher than anticipated special education costs. That's the hotspot teacher positions, and then some other hotspot educational assistant positions that we added. So we do have a little bit of those ESSER dollars that have helped us absorb it, those added costs. So overall, we do think the net to the general fund will be what's expected instead of over what's expected. But unfortunately, it won't be less than was forecasted. So long way of saying the $2 million deficit that was in the adopted budget and was planned for and is part of our planned spend down is what we're still forecasting at this point. For 25-26, we're forecasting a continued decline of enrollment. We don't want to be caught off guard like we were this year. And while we had thought that we would stabilize and we're hopeful that enrollment will stabilize, we have to be more prudent in our budgeting and forecast for that 1% drop. So that means overall, while the state school fund support is not settled, we're going to use a net increase of about 5.5%. Superintendent Owens shared with you that it's expected to be a 6.9% increase next year in absolute terms of funding for the state school fund year over year. However, we have to net out the declining enrollment. So we have to subtract the funds that we're not going to get for the students that are not attending. So we think we're just going to see a 5.5% increase. Pandemic funds are fully exhausted. There's no new funding on the horizon, and expenses are forecasted to grow about 8%. So we're going to be in that deficit number that's previously shared of $3.5 to $4 million if we don't make changes. And this was the breakdown that was previously shared in the dollar amounts that they equate to. So overall, declining enrollments, expenses increasing, expense increases exceed our revenue increases, which require targeted reductions in activities and improving efficiency and efficacy of the remaining activities. So kind of doing more with the same is kind of the charge this year. Continuing our planned use of our ending fund balance. So we did accumulate an ending fund balance over the last several years, and that's why how we're able to kind of weather this storm and overspend our revenue this year, and even overspend our revenue next year a bit. But we do need to make some reductions because the $3.5 to $4 million is not sustainable. That you can see increasing from $2 million to potentially up to $4 million in 1 year, doubling. If we do nothing, then what's next year going to look like, right? It's going to look like a $6 million deficit or more. And at a certain point in time, you have a cliff, right? You've spent all your savings, you didn't trim and year to year, and so now you're going to have drastic cuts 3 years down the road. And that's just very disruptive for students. It's very disruptive for staff. And so we're focusing on some targeted reductions that will minimize impacts to students and more closely manage the deficit to continue our planned spend down. So that's the goal. Opportunity again for questions, and I don't know if we need to go around the horn or just raise hands, whatever Chair Harden would like to do.
I think we have some time, so I think we can go around the horn. Start on the bottom of my list. Director Mooring. Any questions about that section?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Board Chair Solowski. Any questions about that portion?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Board Vice Chair Shields. Any questions?
I'm getting tired of hearing about how much we don't have versus how much we could spend. I think it's going to be an opportunity for a very creative year in terms of thinking about this. Lack of allocation from the state, and I would encourage us as board members and budget committee members to advocate it or with our legislators and really look at the legislative priorities at the state. We'll be reviewing this coming biennium.
Thank you. Myrna Jensen.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Karen Wolfgang. Any questions?
Oh, I'm here. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Newman.
Yeah, hopefully a quick-ish question. The point about targeted reductions, and then this ties into kind of the role of the budget committee members who are not board members is, I guess, do we have any role in understanding targeted reductions, having any input on priorities in that regard?
Absolutely. So that's our next exercise. We'll be going through the priorities for the district to focus on, and you can think of those as core programmatic, priorities that we want to make sure that we insulate from the targeted reductions, right? Things that are in the strategic plans, things that the budget committee, priorities that the budget committee has previously advised us to focus on, and those kinds of things. And that's an opportunity for us to see, are we on the right track? Are those the key parameters to insulate or protect from those targeted reductions, right?
Okay.
I think, yeah, it's important to note, there's nobody pulling the other side of the rope. We all wish we had more funding, right? And there's no argument that I had this conversation with staff, earlier, like every position is critical, every position is important, every person matters, every person contributes to the magic that's going on in the classroom and student learning. And so like school districts are historically underfunded. There are no extra positions. There's nobody sitting around, not doing things and being like, oh yeah, we can trim that. It's unfortunate. Just it is the way that schools are funded in Oregon. And so, but that being said, there are positions and activities that maybe we can improve our efficiency. It's also somewhat naive to see like, oh, we've mastered this, we've done the best, nobody can possibly do better than we can, right? There's opportunity for process improvement. There's opportunity to connect with our peers and other districts and see how they're doing things, and are they more effective or more efficient in getting better outcomes for students with the same effort and the same resources, right? Because we are generally all resourced at the same absolute or prescribed number per student when it comes to operations unless they have a local levy. Oregon has equalization, so whether you're a large district or a small district, you're generally getting the same amount on a per student basis, to allocate teachers and special education and all those things. So long answer to a short question, which, I'm known for, so I apologize.
Oh, no
and-
worries. I didn't expect that to be a answer question.
And,
All right.
absolutely critical that you provide us direction.
Thanks.
Thank you. Director Lynn,
No questions. Thank you.
thank you. Director Andrews,
Yeah, I do have a question. It's on the ADMR and somewhere, so I thought that it was based on just flat out the number of students enrolled, but I think Director Southerton, at some point you may have said, or somebody said that attendance also counts somehow or counts against us if we have chronically absent kids. And if so, could you enlighten us? And that might also help with priorities. Thank you.
I'll just interject because it's funny because Director Southerton and I just had this discussion a few hours ago. We warmed him up for the answer here. Let's see what he's got.
So I would say, in short, the state school formula grant is, an enigma wrapped in a riddle, right? And so it is anything but easy to understand. And so, yes, what has been shared with me and other business managers is that they do consider attendance and look at your attendance data, and that impacts your average daily membership. So with chronic absenteeism and total number of absences, so they're adjusting the funding. What I'm going to do, though, is I have a follow-up to the state school fund coordinator to get more direction on that and see, is it limited to chronic absenteeism? Is it, is it just absences in so much as the 10-day drops? After 10 days, you have to, of not attending, you have to drop people. So let's make that one of the first questions for this budget season, and I will follow up with the committee.
thank you.
I just, I mean, I just have to expand on this just a bit, which is if attendance actually counts in our funding formula, we definitely don't want, or I don't think we would want to cut the kinds of positions that help us make sure kids stay in class.
I think that's super helpful to hear, and I would agree. I would, it's a little bit out of my scope, but I would say that, attending is key to learning. I don't think that's a big leap, right? If kids aren't here, they can't learn. So, and those learning and those all the activities associated with that are a big part of our strategic plan. So I think focusing on improving our chronic absenteeism, is a great priority to focus on. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Director Andrews. Rod Betcher. You're muted. There you go.
Hello again. Yeah, let me just say that I think I'm rowing in the same boat that Michael Newman is. There's a lot of unknowns, and we can't put dollar amounts to those. So, and I guess I'm rowing in the same boat that Claudia is, because I think that we need to have an after session opportunity to ask the questions that we either thought were irrelevant or just been burning for the last 9 months, waiting for this committee to go. Shh, my dog wants input too. Funny thing. But I'd like to put that as an opportunity for the administration to get back out to us in a format that says, this is the question, this is the answer. and let us all see what maybe we were thinking about when we left this meeting. Because I don't think we meet enough. I don't know. I know that drives anyone who goes to meetings crazy, but I don't mind a meeting if it's important. So that's what I want to find out. I guess I want to find out as keep ourselves thinking and get back out to us and give us the information that some of us are out here just wondering. And it'll educate everyone who's been on the budget committee and who are new to the budget committee too. So again, I'll beat my drum on making a good, strong budget committee.
Thank you, Rod. Amber Topham.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That leaves me for last on what I would say, as far as attendance, one thing I'd say is we do have a virtual academy as an opportunity for students who may not be able to be in person due to different challenges. And my question for you, Paul, I know the answer, but just to say it is the funding the same for students in the virtual academy as it is for students that are in person?
Yes, as long as we meet the attendance requirements. They're still required to have meaningful engagement with the students on a daily basis to count them in attendance. So there is, whether that's a phone call, whether that's real-time instructional learning module that may happen as part of that, or other types of engagement, they do need to have that engagement with the students as part of being counted for ADM. Students can't, it's not like perhaps as Vice Chair Shields might be familiar with online learning, where perhaps they check in two times a week in the discussion and then they get their homework in by Sunday, right? That's kind of at the college level for online learning. It's not the same in K-12. And that is a clarification we've had to have with both instructors and with students, that it's not that level of or there is more structure than maybe anticipated.
Thank you. All right, let's keep it moving. So if I'm not wrong, we're moving to item 3.1.4.
We are
budget
indeed.
priorities.
Absolutely. And let me share screen again here. Bear with me. It's nice to be able to see everybody when we're asking questions and interacting. So, all right. So 25-26 budget priorities. What should we consider when we are developing a proposed budget for you all to consider approving for the next school year? So our budget priorities that we have right now that we are considering for including next year are building upon the strategic plan work. So we have building a strong foundation of pre-K through third grade by increasing in access to preschool and early learning programs, growth and attainment of grade level standards in English language and ELA and math by grade 3, supporting every student's well-being and inclusion, centering student voice, empowerment, and leadership. And so I'll let you kind of look through the sub bullets there, but increasing school attendance, you can see sub 2C there. We talked about attendance previously. Equitable access to social emotional supports, services, and instruction, reduction in disproportionality of referrals or suspension, exclusions, and reduction in alternative placements. Increase in student engagement, increase in student engaged in co-curricular activities. And then we have the additional priorities of ensuring equitable access to high quality academics. So percentage of a students accessing academic supports, increase in percentage of students who participate in and successfully complete advanced coursework. You notice we do have growth and attainment of grade level standards at grades 4 through 12. So you saw pre-K through 3 in the previous slide. 4 through 12, we're focusing on ELA, math, and science. and then preparing every student for their future. So percentage of students on track in 9th grade, increasing 4-year graduation rates, 5-year completer rates, percentage of students K through 12 engaged in future ready plan aligned to the profile of the graduate. We had additional priorities for the last budget shared by this committee. So all the priorities that we just went through in the last 2 slides, and then additional priorities. Partner with community groups for use of facilities after hours and weekend access to buildings and new gyms. Maintain co-curricular activities, student voice, leadership, music, arts, athletics, and clubs. Enhance CTE or career and technical educational programs, partnerships with vocational programs and other funding from CTE programs. Expand transportation opportunities for our students and staff to take field trips without needing to fundraise for the bus. So that's a lot of priorities for us to focus on. That's 6 major bullet points and then subsections for each of them. I'd kind of like to take it perhaps slide by slide and hear from the committee. How do we feel about these priorities? Do you want to see a proposed budget in April that speaks to these priorities? Are these the right priorities that we should be focusing on given the constraints that we have? What is the direction from the committee for me as a business manager, and for us as the administration? And if we want to take it by slide by slide, perhaps that's a way to go. I welcome other ways of looking at it.
Thanks, Paul. What I think would be a good idea is we'll take it slide by slide. Feel free to raise your hand as we go through each slide, and then at the end, after we go through the additional priorities, we'll do a roll call in case there's any questions or anything that pops up, so we can make sure everybody has their input. Does anyone? We'll get started with budget priorities 1, 2, and 3 that are part of Roadmap 27. Does anybody have any questions? Are these the right priorities? Feel free to raise your hand. All right, Amber, go
All right.
ahead.
Thanks. I had one question about the early learning and preschool in regards to preschool. Is that funded more through the state with the early preschool programs, or is that something that is also goes in from the weights, measured from the weights and stuff? I'm curious about that.
Yeah,
No.
excellent question. So it is not part of ADM. It's not funded by the Oregon Department of Education for pre-K at this point in time. We participate in Preschool for All through Multnomah County, which was passed by voters. And we had 2 preschool classrooms this year at Powell Butte that we operated, as well as several other pre-K classrooms that were operated by partners like Ready, Set, Go. And next year we anticipate opening up, I believe, 4 additional classrooms. Is that correct, Director Callahan? I'm seeing a nod. So we'll have 4 additional classrooms. Now, Preschool for All funds at a similar level than ODE funds, but it doesn't fund quite enough to cover overhead. And so there's operational costs of having a program in a building. So it funds the teachers and it funds the educational assistants, and it helps with some of the setup costs for the infrastructure and the rooms that needs to be prepared. But there's some incremental overhead that is incurred by the general fund for principals, administrators, custodians, other specialist positions perhaps that could support those programs as well. So I'm hopeful that the direction is going pre-K statewide. In my crystal ball, and let's be honest, that's half of what budgeting is. We're making a plan for next year that starts in September and takes us through June 2026. So it's an informed plan, but it's only a plan. It's not guaranteed at this point. My hunch is that within the next 5 years, pre-K will be part of ADM and it'll be managed by the Oregon Department of Education, because it will go wide enough that they'll want to have that alignment with what's going on in K through 12.
Okay, thank you for that answer.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Board Chair Solowski, I see your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that I think that sticking to some of these roadmap 27 priorities is really important. I think that where I start to wonder about is where we are still in potential relationship with our partners that we developed this with, Performance Fact and others, and our reliance on that. How much are we continuing to invest in that, and where is that? Are we still investing in that relationship? And is that necessary?
We are indeed. They're helping with implementation this year. You may recall that with the I think with the director of human resources position open, we just have an interim person in that, and they just recently started. It's a heavy lift to do a lot of this implementation, and so they're helping us build those competencies. And so I believe the plan, and I'll let Superintendent Owens or Assistant Superintendent Katsuda or Director Callahan speak to that long term, but I believe that's the plan, that they'll help with implementation this year while we're building our competencies for future implementation.
Yeah,
Cool.
the plan is to gradually phase Performance Fact out and incorporate more of the capacity that's been built into internal capacity. They've been helping on specific scopes of work this year around the implementation and integration of the graduate profile that was developed by virtue of the strategic plan, and then also working with schools that were identified by the state as needing either targeted or comprehensive support based on the student outcomes at those schools. We have recently learned, and Director Callahan, get me by the shepherd's hook if I'm revealing information prematurely, but we learned recently that the state will not be funding our CSI and TSI schools in the coming year because, and this is a good thing, we have fewer schools that are requiring that level of state intervention and support. And so with that positive trend, there's a threshold at which they will provide funding. And I think that's to the tune of about $150,000 to $200,000, if I'm not mistaken. And that money will not be provided to us next year. I offered that funding source to say that's where some of the strategic planning support is currently coming from. And just by virtue of the fact that that funding support will no longer be available to us will cause us to reflect in that way as well. Director Callahan, we're pulling you off the bench here if there's anything you want to add to that.
Only that though they're not providing the funding for CSI, TSI, that grant does fall under the integrated guidance. So there is funding there, but of course it'll be less because of that CSI not being funded.
Very complete and thorough answer. Thank you all very much.
All right. Thank you, Chair Slawski. Not seeing any other hands raised. I believe we can move on to the next slide.
I think I had a question. I can't make it.
Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I raised my hand
Go ahead.
here, but I don't. Am I supposed to raise my hand someplace else?
Go ahead, Rod.
Okay, could you go back to the back page, page one? Yeah. I'm after making the statement about loving to be on committees. There's one committee there I wouldn't want to be on, is to increase the school attendance. It seems like it's just stuck in there without any real goal in mind other than increasing attendance. It doesn't give a roadmap of how to do it. You would be trying to overcome the current trend of losing attendance in the districts in the state. That's not. I wouldn't be able to help in that committee because it would be frustrating because we're working with a hole in the glass. We're trying to add it to the top and it's just raining out the bottom. So I think that either you could change. That's, to me, that leaves an open spot for something else to happen under number 2. Should be A, B, D, and then another C. But I don't foresee. I wouldn't want to be on that committee. It just doesn't seem like it's possible to You couldn't say, well, why didn't you get the school to increase its attendance? Well, no one's going to school, in the rest of the districts by 5%, 4%, or whatever it is. So you're fighting a tidal wave of statistics. Anyway, just a thought as I looked at that.
Yeah, I'd say to distinguish though, their attendance is not the same as enrollment. And so while we are seeing a decline in enrollment, there is an opportunity to determine what are the barriers to students that are enrolled, have not moved, do attend in our district. What
And
are
Paul,
what are some of the reasons they're not attending?
and I
And
think
so
A, B, and D address the issue for what C is trying to say.
sure.
I think those things are fine in there, and you've just kind of stuck in a school attendance as a kind of a place marker. Like, yeah, I think you have to feel like you have to put it in there. If we don't, it'll get worse. So anyway, I think A, B, and D do what you're trying to do in C.
Great. Thank you for the feedback, and I appreciate that.
Right. Thank you, Rod. I believe we're set for the next two priorities. All right. Feel free to raise your hand if you have questions, comments. Michael Newman? Go ahead.
Yeah, quick question. I'll lower my hand here. On track and future ready plan and profile of a graduate, are those explicit programs that are named? Just I'm wondering with the all caps on 5A and 5C.
Yeah, feel free to superintendent jump in, but it's a measurement of students that are on track to graduate and in ninth grade. Superintendent Owens or Director
Yeah,
Callahan.
the capitalization could be perceived or implied as some sort of a program, but it's just emphasizing that students would have an appropriate amount of credits to be on a trajectory towards graduation. And there are tactics associated with how we do that are funded within our budget. But the on track being bolded or capitalized just is the formatting. It's not a program. Yeah, good question. As far as the percentage of students K-12 engaged in future ready plan aligned with the profile of a graduate, and this was something that we were going to send an invite out to the budget committee, and we still will for a community forum that we'll be having for the graduate profile work that we will have next week. That profile of a graduate was something that was developed as a part of our strategic planning process, the product of which is intended to be a roadmap from K to 12. So let's say take a grade band K2 or third grade to fifth grade or middle school or high school, and take the graduate profile that was developed that articulates dispositions, life skills, things that you would want a graduate to possess and be able to do, competencies that they'd be able to have, things that they'd be able to demonstrate, and then plan from the K2 band. What is it that we want our kindergartners to be able to do and demonstrate, or first grade or second grade, that will help them build towards these graduation things that we want them to possess as they're walking across the stage. That development process is a collaborative process that we're going through right now to articulate how we would instruct those and what sort of performances of learning that students would be able to demonstrate in the classroom. But those aren't necessarily programs that we would be purchasing or curriculum that we would be purchasing to do that. It's more about our instructional methodology and what we would be doing and how we would be articulating to use our current instruction in our instructional practices to emphasize that. I don't know if that answer made sense, but
yeah, no, that does. And I'm the parent of a senior at Centennial High School, so I'm also trying to track what I know they've been doing in some of their classes to these priorities here.
Yeah.
I would also just throw in a plug for I think that there's still a lot of value in goals like 4C, increasing percentage of student, really the high quality academics and maintaining it, as we're also looking to not miss out students who are maybe at risk, but also maintaining engagement for the students who can and do want to engage in the advanced courses. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else on this slide? Not seeing anything. I think we're good. Okay to move on. Okay. The additional priorities.
So these were informed by this committee last year. And
These were
so informed by you all, or provided to us by you all. You gave us these direction in addition to the roadmap 27 priorities. And so another opportunity to just check in, given with the limited funding we have and we're looking for targeted reductions, are these the right things to focus on keeping and on funding?
Oh, we have a hand raised. Director Mooring, go ahead.
Thanks, Jess. On these additional priorities, I guess the question I had, or just thinking about here, are these from a budgetary perspective, are these revenue generators at all, or are these just all falling in the expense column?
These are all in the expense column. So partnering with community groups for use of facilities after hours and weekends. The direction by the committee was to help fund some additional custodial hours who would then be able to open and monitor and close the buildings for community use if we could connect with some partners. So we've reached out to some of our son groups or who provide after school programming, and we've reached out recently to the Gresham Youth Violence Reduction group to see if they have some partners who could help activate these spaces and provide youth opportunity during after school hours or on weekends, maybe participating in intramurals, for example, or something else. So we're exploring that. There's not a large bandwidth, if you will, of groups able to provide those services as of yet. But the team over at the city of Gresham was excited about the opportunity and is connecting with some of their partner groups to see if using our facilities for hosting their programming would be good.
Thank you. And then just quick follow-up. I mean, I think these are all fantastic additional priorities. But are there, and maybe not within the subset currently listed, but are there revenue generating opportunities?
It's a great question. They
Could there
are.
be? Could we think on ways, and maybe this is just an open-ended question for the group at this point, to think about, would there be ways to use the facilities in a revenue generating manner consistent with, all policies and all the good things?
Yeah, I think our Principal Miller and our athletic director, Dante Gouch, have been exploring opportunities to rent the turf field, for example, the all-weather field and the track. And we've had one or two events. We've had, we have somebody running the swimming pool for a weekend here and there, but they're not large in scope at this point in time. There's the budget committee and the board approved the adoption of 2 hours a day, 0.25 FTE for a grant writer position, with the direction to explore that and see how that, if that could add value. And so we've been working with our peer districts, Reynolds and David Douglas and others who have somewhat similar positions or opportunities, and the consensus is those positions have helped immensely with workload, but they haven't brought in new grants of a material source. They don't pay for the position. And so we have not deployed that position in the current year, given the declining enrollment and the increased costs that we already saw, and the research so far that has not provided a promising direction to materially increase. Essentially, competitive funding is what you'd be asking for, or commercial funding, right? The non-competitive funding that all districts receive, they receive automatically. And so, we continue to explore that, and we have yet to find any large and meaningful sources of revenue that we're not already getting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Chair Salowski, I believe you were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention on the transportation piece. I think that ensuring that there was something that came up last year, and I want to ensure that all students, especially at summer school, have the opportunity, all high school students have the opportunity to take the bus. I think that there was something missing there. And if we've got kids that are wanting to get there for credit recovery, I think that we should be able to provide transportation for that. I'm sorry, that just popped into my head right at this moment.
No, that's super helpful. I recall that conversation and that engagement. And Principal Miller, correct me if I'm wrong, but some programs at the high school we didn't offer transportation to during summer school, and some programs we did. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, depending on the different programs involved. Yes.
And so what I'm hearing is across the board, it would be a good idea to offer transportation. Board Chair Solowski, is that accurate?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Lynn?
Yes, thank you. Kind of echoing somewhat what other people are saying, and also related to some earlier priorities, particularly attendance. I think the transportation is a very important thing, and I think the idea of exploring the grant writer was really to get some of that extra funding, and see what other districts have been able to materialize, because there's all kinds of things going on, and there's all kinds of situations affecting our students. Students are late. Students have families that can't transport them, and these are not like regular situations. Sometimes it's just a one-off, and instead of getting to school, they stay home. And we've been kind of pushing more about the bus pass program, and I'm not clear if we're realizing all the resources that we could be getting through TriMet. My son had a little bit of difficulty just getting a bus pass at the high school, and so I think we could really be encouraging getting bus passes into every student's hands, regardless of situation and regardless of grade level, to really be making that culture of using transportation in the community, and other things like bike buses, and giving away free bikes. Some of our families might need that. And we're not going to get that out of our regular budget. We're only going to see that if we see some extra funding come in for that specific reason. So I think these are really good priorities to maintain. And then 6A, anecdotally, I'm still hearing from other community groups that we don't have the stuff like chairs. I heard just, again, anecdotally from a group that there's not adult-sized chairs at all locations. So they weren't able to make arrangements to use the facilities, even though they wanted to. So I think, of course, given our budget constraints and realizing that, we still want to see some of these measures improve and not just kind of maintain the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lynn. Anyone else before we'll do a quick roll call to see if there's any final questions? All right, we'll go through everyone just to make sure we're all heard. Amber Topham?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Director Andrews?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Director Lynn, did you have anything else additional you wanted to add?
Just kind of saying again about the improving and seeing how we can do better on terms of number 3, student engagement and voice. I think we're kind of treading water and not seeing a whole lot of improvement or increase student voice.
Thank you. Michael Newman?
I'm thinking about how to give any sort of thoughts or direction about these priorities. Would it be possible to maybe create a poll of all of these? We can rate these various priorities 1 to 5, something that we could do to provide some hard data to the to you all, or would that be valuable information to you?
It's a great suggestion. Our previous practice is I typically follow up this meeting with an email the next day. We'll attach to the presentation and then attach a document with all the priorities in it, and then you all have an opportunity to provide that feedback to us for the next week. So now, if we want to put that up as a survey, I can work on that and see if you know, test my Google skills a little bit. I think I can pull it off. We have the technology to invite some additional feedback on that.
Yeah, I kind of remember that process from last year. I would appreciate being able to do that, if you think that the numbers would be valuable, useful.
Thank you. I love the ideas. That's great. Myrna Jensen?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Rod Betcher? Anything else?
I'm back on again. I'm sorry, I had myself muted because of the dog. As I said it myself, apparently. I want to thank Amber for really giving me the statement. No questions at this time. They will follow, though.
Thank you. Board Vice Chair Shields?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Board Chair Salowski?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Director Mooring?
Thanks, Chair Harden. Briefly, I would just echo Director Lynn's comments on student engagement and need to maybe just examine that a little bit deeper for increasing its impact. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I'm always on board with a student voice and leadership. I think that maintaining the co-curricular activities is a great additional priority. And access to our buildings afterwards, and really, I believe, is important to maintain and to grow a community group, and having access for these groups to meet at our place. The schools really are a hub of the neighborhoods. Well, I think we did it, everybody. So unless there's any additional information,
Just some
go
housekeeping,
ahead.
thank you, Chair Harden, just a couple housekeeping items. So reminder, we do have the first official meeting, April 23rd. So that's the first opportunity to take action. You'll receive the superintendent's budget message at that meeting, as well as the proposed budget. So we will be presenting that to you and highlighting the year-over-year changes, so additions and subtractions of consequence in that budget. we'll also have discussion, potentially public comment, if we feel like that budget has landed and there's the option to approve it. Our practice has always been to have a second meeting, so it may just be discussion and feedback from the budget committee. It'll be up to you all at that point. Then a second meeting would be on May 28th. That would be a final budget recommended for approval based on the feedback that you all provided us from the April 23rd meeting. We typically will have a feedback period of a week after the first meeting, so April 23rd to April 30th. That provides you time to do a page turn, to ask questions, get feedback, do more research, provide, clarifying and questions and suggestions, and for us to provide information back to you all, explaining things in the budget. And then on that May 20th meeting, we would again have discussion, public comment, and then approve the budget, tax levy, and send the budget to the school board for consideration of adoption, which would take place at the public hearing on June 18th. So we do appreciate everybody turning out. I appreciate you all attending this work session and these meetings. I appreciate the time, and you all have had just amazing and wonderful engagement and questions. So thank you so much. And we really need you at the next two meetings. Again, I can't stress enough, if we don't have a quorum, we can't move forward. If we can't move forward, we can't pay anybody in July. So regardless of whether we have funds or not, I have no authorization to issue any checks and pay anybody or any vendors or any legal obligations in July if we don't pass a budget. So please help me by providing or continuing to have that engagement and help the district, and ask your questions. Let me know how I can help you be an informed committee, so you feel very comfortable and confident in in the decisions and the votes that you will be asked to be making.
Thank you. And you will provide the slideshow to us with the priorities, and then when is our deadline to get you questions and feedback on the priorities?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think I'm gonna adopt Michael's suggestion of creating just a rating poll, so we can you all as the committee members, because you all are the only ones to get the votes for this process, can tell us which of those priorities are important or we should focus on, right? And with the recommendation of the administration is, we believe these priorities are on track. We believe these priorities support students and will provide a student-focused budget. And so the recommendation of the administration is that we keep these priorities, because these are multi-year long-term priorities we want to continue focusing on. That's our recommendation to the committee, but we want to make sure from you all that we're getting a thumbs up that sounds right and feels right as community members, as parents of students, as budget committee members. So I'll send that out in survey form as Michael suggested, and then you'll be able to provide that kind of thumbs up, thumbs down kind of to these priorities. And then that is very helpful to us to inform what we should bring back to you in April, because you're informing us what we should bring to you in April.
Great, thank you for that. Rod, quick question. You're muted. Rod, I'm sorry, you're muted. Quick question.
I'm there.
For the good of the order.
I think I hit my button accidentally, but I will say that Paul did provide us with some power as a committee that people don't get paid unless we sort of the next two meetings. So there's a little power for us to apply here.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your attendance and engagement tonight. It's great to have it. I don't know if I've ever seen all the committee members here at this priority meeting, so thank you very much for everything. And we will call the meeting adjourned at 7:49. And Vice Chair Shields.
Using this link for our board meeting continue. Is that correct? Superintendent Owen?
Yes, we can stay on for the board meeting. So the budget committee is adjourned. Budget committee members, you're welcome to stay. If you would like to be to hear the board meeting, but do not feel like you have to by any means. But if you are so interested, by all means, you're welcome to stay around. And are we taking a break or are we going right on into it?
No, let's take a break. Let's start our meeting at 8 o'clock straight up, please. And those of you who, good night. And those of you who have to stay, we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Chair. So I'd like to call this meeting to order, and may I have the a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, because we are virtually, you may indicate by saying aye, and you can also wave at the camera. Aye.
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 Thank you, guys. No introduction of guests. I don't believe we'll go ahead and Lauren is no new to us in that respect, and so the introductions will happen when we get to that part in terms of the reports. We do have the January 8th minutes that have been presented to you. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor, raise your hand and indicate by saying aye.
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 I assume no one's opposed to that. Thank you. We are able to skip through public forum. This is a work session of the Centennial School Board, so we do not take public forum during work sessions. So we are on to section 5, which is reports, strategic planning and implementation, media review with Dr. Kasuda and with Lauren Hefty. I'm not even sure how to say that, but before we begin there, Superintendent Owens, did you want to do any introduction to this, or do we go directly to Dr. Kasuda?
Just in keeping with protocol, I will say hi, everybody, and I will pass it right along over to Dr. Katsuda and Lauren Klafke for our presentation this evening. Thank you, Chair Shields, Vice Chair Shields.
Great to see everyone this evening. I am happy again to welcome Lauren back to our board meeting. I wanted to share just a very short bit of information to contextualize the work that Performance Fact is engaged in with the district. As you may recall, we touched upon this earlier or late last year as well. Performance Fact, specifically spearheaded and led by Lauren, is supporting us in data-informed professional collaboration to advance our strategic plan forward this year. She's also working with the district, collaborating with district leaders on monitoring and evaluation by supporting or through Performance Fact, supporting the surveys that we're administering across our district community, student, staff, family, supporting the vital signs scorecard, which we use for monitoring in the schools, and providing the board with these updates. In addition to that, which I'm sure you'll hear about tonight in the mid-year review, some significant work around moving forward with the profile of the graduate and work across our community, collaborative work across our community to actualize that through a development plan. So wanted to welcome Lauren, and she can provide even more detail on all of that, but I thought it would bring us back to those 3 areas of work that we're engaged in specifically this year with Performance Fact.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see you. Thank you for the opportunity to share an update on some of the work we've been engaging in thus far this year. I will pop up my presentation and we can dig in. We wanted to start by just giving you an update on some of the implementation support, and we talk about supporting in the key areas that Dr. Katsuda mentioned, and we're going to dig into one of those in depth with our time together today. there are two things that I wanted to kind of ground us in. All of the work that we're doing is aligned to supporting the district and moving forward the goals in Roadmap 27. And the two key areas that we're focused on are that profile of a graduate work, which we'll talk about in depth today, and then all key components along the roadmap for discipline implementation, which is organized, we suggest is organized around the calendar. And specifically, we've been doing work with the intensive, we call it the Intensive School Transformation Program, but specifically working with the CSI, TSI school sites. So to ground the portrait of a graduate work or the profile work, the profile is this North Star vision of that the community co-constructed as part of the strategic planning process to articulate the skills and dispositions that we want to ensure that all Centennial students are developing over the course of their time, going from pre-K all the way through right up to and beyond 12th grade. And as part of the strategic plan, there are several key actions and priorities that were developed that connect to and are deeply embedded with the portrait or this profile work. And so in the work that you're going to kind of experience and see that we're undertaking, it's really aligned with enacting and moving forward several of these priorities, particularly in the area of student teaching and learning. So I'm going to start us with a video and hope that the sound is all great. When we kicked off our 2-day design retreat with community partners, students, parents, and staff last week. It was last week. Okay, yes. We wanted to share and vision some different ways of thinking about what can be done with a portrait of a graduate or profile of graduate. How have districts envisioned taken that raw material and turned it into a vehicle to really center students' voice experience and to provide the kind of rigorous learning opportunities that we desire for all students in the system. So I am going to share this video. It's about 4 minutes long, and it comes out of Fairfax County Public Schools in Northern Virginia, and it's grounded in their portrait. So you'll hear the students and folks talking about some of the qualities from their portrait. You have care for community, care for self, right? Passionate, purposeful. They'll be saying things like ethical global citizens, goal-directed and resilient, but just want to give you a taste of what your staff and students and the folks that engage in the work have been thinking about.
Graduate, it's just a bunch of different life skills, like being a collaborator, being able to work with someone, ability to be able to talk to someone, and being an ethical and global citizen, being kind and knowing about our environment and the rest of the world, and being a creative and critical thinker, like use your bubblegum brain, like Miss Kelleher likes to say, and being goal-directed and resilient, always working hard and persevering. So portrait graduate skills are really important, and they're like life skills. I feel like it's like a life skill, like things that you use regularly in life that'll help you become a better person and be able to interact with other people in a way that makes you feel comfortable and it makes them feel comfortable, which I feel like is very important.
For 10 years, FCPS has had a focus on portrait of a graduate. Teachers truly had to make a shift in their instruction in order to make these skills really a part of their instruction and a part of their everyday. If we think about what our teachers are doing with their students, they had to start to really provide kids opportunities to practice these skills. What does that look like?
In our classroom, we do like a lot of activities with groups of people. So we can use our POG collaborator and communicator skills to work together and make something awesome. Have just different perspectives of different people. Yeah. And when you have an idea, you maybe people will like adjust it to make it better, to make it easier.
There's a big shift going from portrait of a graduate now to portrait of a graduate presentations of learning, right? We're no longer just teaching the kids the skills and making sure they're using them. We're giving them an opportunity to reflect on these skills, to be able to say, I grew, I can prove it, this is why it matters. We wanted to make sure that these POG skills become not just teacher known, but student owned. So yes, teachers know, sure, I'm giving my kids a chance to be creative and critical thinkers, or sure, I'm giving them chances to collaborate and communicate, right? But do the students know it? And that's where the power is.
It's important for me to reflect on getting better, because if you don't reflect, then you're not going to go anywhere and you're just going to keep doing it, but you'll never find out where you are and like where you stand and how you can improve.
We're like honing in on like, how are we growing with these skills? Like what's changing over the years? How did we start as a communicator? And now towards the end of high school, like how have we grown and done stuff with that skill that we couldn't have done like at the beginning of high school?
It's really important for students to talk about their growth because this helps them kind of be able to see how they grew as a person in general instead of just how they grew as a student.
If I hadn't learned about Portrait of a Graduate, I probably would have grown up still pretty quiet, like I was when I was younger. Like I wouldn't have shared my opinions. If there's an unfair law, you could speak up with Portrait of a Graduate skills and say what you can improve about that law, and it could change.
As we go to college, I think having these skills is like so important because we'll be on our own. And these skills have taught us how to like hold ourselves accountable and get through work on our own, because we won't have the same kind of relationship that we have with teachers, with them helping us and guiding us through it in the future. And so being able to have all these skills under our belts, it's really just going to help open so many more doors that could have been closed had we not been doing this for so many years.
Thank you. So when we come together with the profile design work, we were started to dabble in some of the questions that were raised just by seeing this video. The design team that came together last week included students, parents, community members, and staff. And they had two main priorities and tasks. The first was to take the profile of a graduate and to consider how are we backwards mapping the qualities so that we can kind of articulate what does it look like in the early primary grades, upper elementary, middle, and high school, so that we have a clear roadmap of those skills progressions over time, that students, families, and staff members would have a shared understanding of the skills that we're working to develop for all of our learners in our system. And then the second part is, having done that, having articulated kind of this vision of what we want to see K-12, what are the implications for what effective instruction must look like so that all of those skills can be developed in the classroom? We saw in the video, there's an example where they talked about the changes or the shifts that had to happen in practice, and the way that that community has chosen to implement the profile. And so this was an opportunity for the Centennial community to come together and start to do some of that own visioning work and ask those same questions. So share just a snapshot. There's 6 qualities in your profile. They've drafted the very first draft of kind of what those look-fors might be aligned to the profile. So on this page, this is from the inquisitive and innovative quality of your profile, and there were 3 attributes. So maintaining a curious mindset. And so looking at from primary level, what is at the beginning, all the way up to high school, what would that look like as I advance through the years? The second example, this is from Care for Self, looking at those 3 the 3 attributes: prioritizes personal health and wellness, cultivates positive relationships, and then again, what are those key look-fors as they're going through? So we have an initial draft that's been developed for all 6 qualities coming out of the 2-day design retreat. Folks worked really hard. And I was very proud of the way and the fact that students really led the way. The students who were participants in the group really grounded and centered the work. We've provided we've gotten a first level of feedback on it. And then the next step is that we'll be sharing all of this work out at every school site to get the feedback and the input from the staff at each school campus. And there will also be the community forum next week. for community input. These are just some images from the day, some of the community partners, parents, and students who were part of that designing and visioning process. And this in particular is when we transitioned from what were those quality mapping to what is the vision for instruction. So students and different teams got together and said, well, what would this look like if we really were going to see the profile living in our classrooms? What would that look like in our classrooms? What would that look like in school and out of school? And the members shared their vision and their ideas. And then they worked together to kind of recommend what were the most critical attributes of instruction that we wanted to see on a regular basis. And then for anybody in the room who'd participated in our strategic planning process knows how the debate and discussion goes on. This one moved a little bit quicker. Folks were very aligned on their thinking, as you can see in their clusters of ideas. And so just to give you a sense of kind of what are the big ideas that came up as critical and essential elements in this instructional vision, centering on culturally and linguistically relevant instruction, ensuring that it's relationship-centered learning is happening in the classrooms, that students' voice and ownership is prioritized, that there's rigorous academic engagement and high expectations, that there's a wealth of actionable reflection and feedback that's taking place for students to be reflecting on their own growth and learning and getting feedback as to where they are, and that learning is community connected. That there was a real desire to make those connections to learning happening both in and out of the classroom, as well as bringing community into the classroom to participate in supporting learning. So this, the instructional vision is in a draft form as well, and it will be worked on further when we come back together with the next steps for the process. There is a community forum. It would be great to have you all there. And we have our feedback, and our third design retreat day is on in February. Tasha, do you think just continuing to just do questions at the end, or just see if folks want to ask any questions about the profile first?
Yeah, I think questions now, since the other items are distinct. So
Yeah, that's great. So love to hear your thoughts, questions, wonderings, anything regarding the work that we're doing with the profile. I'm happy to share.
Just forward board and unmute yourself if you do have a question. One of the questions I would have, Lauren and Tasha, was some shared with the participants before the documentation that we have, or the materials that you've shared, were those shared prior so people could refresh their thought process? And will we be doing something like that in our community forum, like giving materials out prior to the community forum so people are kind of ready for the discussion?
For the Portrait of a Graduate Design Retreat days, we were with them for 2 full days. And so we processed everything together. So there was time for reading. We kind of made meaning first of like what the profile is. There's some folks who hadn't been part of the strategic planning process and were like, what's the profile? You know, so there was that was shared. But the majority of the inputs were video based. And then the majority of what was generated was all generated from their own speaking discussion at their table groups. And they just did several activities to elicit that. In terms of sharing things in advance for the community forum, I think that could be great if we had the capacity to know who is coming and let them have access to some materials in advance. I can talk with Tasha about how we could do that. The key point is to be getting folks dreams and ideas and aspirations, and hearing from them. Yeah, so I'm excited for that.
Board members? I know you know how to use the hand, so. All right, guys, I guess we're moving on.
All right, thank you. So the next part that I wanted to share was just regarding the work around the roadmap for discipline implementation. We kind of organize our work in terms of supporting districts and developing what is the cadence and routine that we use to ensure that we are keeping our focus on our strategic plan goals and chunking it into manageable pieces where we can monitor what's happening, make adjustments, learn, collaborate, reflect, plan, and evaluate. The focus has been increasingly clear over the time we've worked. I really want to commend the work of the cabinet and Superintendent Owens on keeping the strategic plan so centered in their planning and centering in on the goals and keeping that at the forefront and aligning and alignment around that. It's been very impressive. So at the start of the school year, just in terms of what we've supported, we're worked on finalizing the vital sign scorecards for the school sites, which involves identification of their key metrics in their school improvement plans and setting of those goals and developing the dashboards for monitoring student progress. We also supported in helping the cabinet finalize their priorities for the year, as well as developing district goal plans. So for each of the priority areas or each of the goals, there are specific plans that are in place that are being acted on to move forward the priorities. And we supported the schools in finalizing those improvement plans. Every month, we've been engaging with 5 schools, campuses that have been identified as needing, as receiving targeted or comprehensive school improvement support, and been providing coaching for the school leaders, leading instructional walkthroughs, and in some cases, particularly at the secondary level, providing leadership team capacity building. So working with the entire leadership team. And those school visits are both designed to be deepening and the instructional leadership lens of the site leaders, as well as ensuring that we have a touch point for monitoring progress towards the school improvement goals, in particular with the focal student groups that have been identified for targeted support. We've been supporting at the, says every 9 weeks, this is at the trimester, while we haven't been working on a monthly basis with every school, as we did the previous year, we are, have convened 1 data summit for all of the schools, and we'll have 2 more this year. And this is where the school-based leadership teams that include teachers and administrators and staff come together to reflect on progress towards their annual goals. We prepare the data reports, and we've been incorporating the progress monitoring surveys. So this year, every campus is giving 3 progress monitoring surveys, students, staff, and community, each having an option to be responding to those surveys. So we have now at this point, we have some longitudinal data that we're seeing to be able to monitor growth and development aligned to the school improvement goals and the strategic plan goals. And then just to note that we still, in addition to those comprehensive in addition to the progress monitoring surveys, we're going to have our annual comprehensive student survey, staff survey, and family community survey in the spring, which will be the full gamut of all the questions that were asked during the equity audit. And we'll continue to be monitoring the growth and progress in a longitudinal manner. And so looking ahead, we have data summits for all schools coming up in March and May. We'll be continuing our monthly coaching and support. We'll have the updated dashboard for the district at the trimesters, as well as the vital signs scorecard for the school. Our surveys and our POG work is going to continue, and I hope to see some folks out at some of that. It would be great to, if you can make it to the community forums, or pop into a design retreat if you're free in February. And that is what we got. That's a wrap for my slide deck.
I'm getting hands. Yes, you guys, you're getting great.
Hands now. Yay. Okay.
Well, would you like to go ahead and get us started on some of these questions? And then, yes. Oh, well, did you have a question?
Oh, no, sorry. I accidentally clicked the wrong button.
That's okay. We'll
But
check
but
back.
while I'm on the spot,
Oh, you're here. Okay, great.
thank you, Lauren. That was awesome. The video from the kids of Virginia was fantastic, and it's really inspiring and encouraging. And it's just great to know that we're enriching our own students' lives in a similar manner. And it's I think just gentle reminders of why we do what we do.
That's great. Thanks, Will.
Yes.
Yes. What is a longitudinal survey?
Oh, yes, meaning that we'll have longitudinal data.
Yeah, what is that?
Oh, thank you.
And what's the importance of that?
So by administering the same survey questions over multiple years, you get multiple data points so that you can see growth. You know, you can track this growth at the same grade levels. So I can look at last year's, third graders and see the fourth grade, and then next year when they're fifth grade, I can see what's happening. So you can really start to see where you're making gains and progress in that data. Which those 10 question survey is really focused on alignment to your strategic plan goals. So for goal 2 and goal 3, things around student voice, things around student sense of belonging. So you're going to get to have a more robust data report that we can actually start to see where we're seeing movement.
And then my other question is, what kind of feedback are you getting on implementation from the other staff members that are in these meetings?
Yeah, well, we should. I'm staring at Mr. Miller here. Give us feedback, and Ms. Callahan. So the feedback from the data summits, so I'll give you that. That's the all staff or all school work. We asked the same several questions at each session, which was, I'm clear on where we're going as a school. I understand what my next steps are in terms of those school improvement, and I'm excited about coming back and doing this work again. And those by and large have been extraordinarily positive. I can bring some of that to share with you guys next time I'm here. And then I would say the other kind of feedback that we take is more of an analysis of the quality of the work product. So if we look at the very first data summit that we had and kind of what the outputs were and how the team functionings were to where we are now, the teams are much more cohesive. They are coming up with very clear action items that are aligned to like the next 12-week cycle. And they're all able to kind of articulate, this is what we're working on and why. And that is a really impressive growth that's happened over time. And I really give kudos to not just the cabinet, but the principals who are really the kind of the shepherds of that work at their table groups as we facilitate. So that's been the key piece. And then that's a good question. I don't think I've actually asked my this is a new program doing the working with the CSI TSI schools, and so I will go and gather some additional data and feedback on what's been effective or what will be more effective.
Principal Miller or Director Callahan, do you wish to weigh in since you were name dropped?
No, I mean, just what Lauren was sharing. Want to just anecdotal give you an example, and this actually goes with what Director Lynn was also talking about earlier. One of the things that has come out of like our data summary and our analysis is our need to make sure that we are pulling student voice into the process. And so like next month, we will actually be sharing all the same data out that was shared with us with the data summit. And we're going to be actually sharing it with the students, leading them through the exact same process and asking the questions, what's going well, what are some implications and what can we do better? And then we will be bringing that all back to the next data summit and really incorporating the student voice in. And so it's just that cumulative power. And that's something that we wouldn't have done a few years ago. But the fact that student voice is a part of it as well.
And I would just add that each data summit, along with the processes in between, are really demonstrating an iterative process where every time we look at the data, we're thinking differently about the work that we do. I see and hear our principals really being much more targeted on the PD that they're facilitating with staff to build capacity, and it's lining up quite well to their improvement plan, which lines up to our district strategic plan. So, and I think every time we do it, we just get better at that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That's great.
Okay, Claudia, Director Andrews, did you have any questions or comments?
No questions. Thank you, Lauren. Good to see you again.
You too.
Director Lynn,
No, thank you.
Director and Chair Salaski.
No, thank you.
That was great. Thank you very much. It's late where you were.
I know it's late. Yeah, I know. I'm way past my bedtime.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah.
Owens, anything to wrap it up? And Lauren, do you
No, appreciate all the collective effort. Appreciate the questions from the board, and we'll keep trucking.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Good night. Okay, Director Owens, any other comments about this particular report before we move on to the rest of the agenda?
No.
Okay, thank you. So, directors, I have you look through the confirmation items, which frankly is just the one that has been previously shared with you. I have a motion to approve the confirmation items.
Oh, and Chair Shields, I do have a report tonight, if that was the question.
Yes, I do see that. I was hoping you were just like, so satisfied with everything we've been right ahead.
Well, I did prepare the report, so I figure I should deliver it, but I did read the room and know that we're on the heels of a budget committee meeting, so I kept it short. So if you are okay with indulging me, I'll
Thank you.
Provide it briefly. All right, greetings, board members. My pleasure and privilege to share with you this update on happenings in the district. As board members know, this evening was our budget committee work session where committee members had the opportunity to discuss the district's financial outlook and priorities for the 25-26 budget. I appreciate the engagement of our budget committee in this important process and look forward to working with Director Southerton to present a draft budget for the committee's consideration in April. As was just spoken to in the previous report, last Monday and Tuesday was we had more than 40 staff, student, parent, family, and community partner representatives from across the district who collaborated together to continue the development of our Centennial profile of a graduate. As previously mentioned, the profile of a graduate was developed as part of the strategic planning process for Roadmap 27 and is a guiding vision for our pre-K to 21 educational system that identifies the essential knowledge, skills, dispositions, and interpersonal competencies a Centennial student will develop for their educational journey for readiness and success in their future endeavors. At the design retreat, participants completed a draft of the instructional vision, planned for demonstrations of learning, and developed a draft progression matrix. Yesterday, our administrative team had a chance to review the draft products, provide input, and determine how they will lead a similar review of the draft products with their respective staff so that we have input from staff from across each school and across the district. Here you can see some additional pictures of the design retreat, and I would say that the student voice element, and you can see several students here in the pictures, were a true highlight to the time. In addition to our staff, our families and community will have the opportunity to weigh in on the products of the profile of a graduate design team. Next Thursday, January 30th, we will be hosting a community forum at 6 p.m. to 7:30 at the Centennial High School Community Room, coinciding with the parent-teacher conferences that are happening there. The purpose of the community forum is to establish collective commitment, engagement, and feedback from constituents reflective of the Centennial community. This can include students, staff, family and caregivers, or community partners. We plan to have childcare and translation support available in multiple languages. We're publicizing the forum in several venues and welcome you to attend as well. Executive Assistant Missy Grindle recently sent a calendar invitation, and I hope that some of you are able to make it. Finally, for the third time and second year in a row, Oliver Middle School partnered with Kaiser Permanente to host a community food drive. This was held 2 days ago on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday from 10 to 2. The Sunshine Division was on site at Oliver distributing boxes of food. Each box was designed to feed a family of 4 for about a month, and the event was open to families of Oliver, Park Lane, and Patrick Lynch. Families who attended were not required to provide their name or sign up for anything. Families could simply drive or walk up and request the box that they wanted. Kudos to Oliver Middle School Principal Jeb Hubbs and the staff of OMS for their continued emphasis on community engagement efforts to benefit Centennial families. With that, I invite any questions or comments you might have, and that concludes my superintendent's report.
Board members for comment. I have a quick question, maybe this is for Principal Miller. When we have the portrait of the graduate meeting at the high school, are both doors open, like the front doors, you know, in the front of the building, and the kind of the back doors where the back parking is? Or do we all have to come through the front to get to the...
Yeah, this is a great question. This is happening during our conference time. So both doors will be open, so people can come either direction, and that's part of the reason to host it at this particular time.
Thank you. I appreciate knowing where to park. Any other questions, board members? So looking around the room, seeing none, then thank you, Superintendent Owen, for your report that I was going to skip right by.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shields. I appreciate the opportunity.
Let's go into the confirmation items, having an opportunity to look at it through board book. Do we have a motion to approve the confirmation items?
I move we approve the confirmation items.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and seconder to approve the confirmation items. All those in favor indicate by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
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 Looks like we have everyone responding. Thank you so much. And Missy, if I'm going too fast, let me know. I haven't been confirming names for a long while. All right, moving down the list of on our agenda, you'll notice, board members, that we don't have anything in specific listed under old business. But Superintendent Owens, is there anything that you need to bring to our attention under old business?
Nope.
All right. And then board members, we also do not have anything listed under new business. This is not unfounded because we are in a work session. But Superintendent Owens, anything that you would like to list there?
Nope.
All right. And then future agenda items, of course, we do look to you, Superintendent Owens, for anything.
We have the possibility of some student recognitions. I believe that Principal Miller is working with his staff to help elevate some student recognitions at our upcoming board meetings. So be looking forward to that potentially. We have the student transfer process report and recommended transfer parameters. And so that is a annual element that we do this time of year. We also have the annual comprehensive audit report findings from Polly Rogers. And so our auditing firm will present on our audit that was recently conducted. And then perhaps a few policies. OSBA is a little bit delayed on providing the promised policies, given some of the federal changes, has complicated some of the laws that underpin the policies. So there's a little bit of work that they're doing to get everything reconciled and into our hands. So that's what we got.
Thank you. Board members, are there any other additions or additions for future agenda items, or good of the order would be appropriate at this time? Director Andrews, please.
We have the executive session next week, and I'm sorry I haven't looked far enough ahead, but are we virtual or in person on that?
My understandings were in person. Does anyone need to correct me on my understanding?
Can't get to my mute button fast enough. This meeting will take place in person at the district office. Thank you for the reminder about that. Director Andrews, and it is scheduled for 2 hours, 6:30 to 8:30. Anything to add, Missy? Okay, perfect.
And I would say that that's extremely important because it will be on our upcoming contract negotiations with our CEA. So need to be there. Hi, David, please.
Just hoping we got to some announcements. I already mentioned the cleanup the neighborhood's having on March 29th. There's a tree planting scheduled on February 8th. It's just inside our district. It's on 176th and Main Street. It's at the Harmony Montessori School, 8:45 to 1 o'clock. And if we can keep it, everybody can keep a secret in this public meeting, the Mediterranean Market on 166th and Division, Best Fresh, they're starting out a new wood-fired pizza. So I would really recommend everybody stopping by and supporting a local business. But they're just trying it out in the afternoon, and so hopefully people can give them some, patience as they try to get their feet under them. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And any reminders that you want to send us is really helpful. I will attest to that. Thank you again. Any other, go to the order from any other board members or staff? Oh, you guys are just looking like you're done. All right, then we'll call for the adjournment of the Centennial School District Board. At what time is it? 8:40 p.m. Thank you, guys. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Hope you feel better.
Thanks.